Okay, so hello everyone. I haven't done one of these in a while now. Today is Monday, December 4th. That means that we are almost 2 months since October 7th,
Yeah.
and I'm here, getting together with Dina.
hmm
Um, Dina and I have never actually met until today, and we got together through a good friend of mine as her cousin, right? She's your cousin,
Yep.
Daniela. So thank you, Daniela, for meeting us together. And the reason we're getting together here today is because Dina basically lives in America, but she came here in the wake of October 7th. I don't even know if it was planned to come anyway or it was sort of for that event. We'll talk about that in a moment.
Yeah.
But and has been spending basically her whole time here since she came, volunteering, right? That basically helping out with all sorts of soldiers, etc. And I wanted us to meet because I feel that there's so much, civil, like the civil society in Israel is really amazing. The amount of volunteering that's happening, the kinds of things people are doing, not just in terms of giving money, but in terms of the time that they spend.
hmm
And it also means that people get to meet a lot of very, people from diverse backgrounds and all sorts of interesting, setups, and getting to see different sides of the society and different sides of the kind of thing that we're going through, the trauma, the happiness,
Yeah.
the failures, the successes, etc. So I know you've been doing a lot of different things, and I figured we'd sit down and hear a little bit about some of the things you've been doing.
Great.
Um,
Thank you. This is so important what you're doing, and I want to share. I want to
mhm.
share because it's been a very meaningful time for me, and I never realized I didn't have a set plan when I came here. I was coming here because my daughter was she was determined to start Bar Ilan University, and her heart was here. And my whole life, my raising her, I never put fear in her. She always came to Israel, and it was never, oh, aren't you scared? She was never like that, and I wasn't going to take that away from her because of October 7th.
Yeah,
But I was scared, and I didn't want to ruin her approach in life.
yeah.
And if she was still so excited about going to Bar Ilan, I was going to support her in that.
So when was she supposed to come by the
She was
original plan?
supposed to start. She was supposed to leave that Monday.
Wow,
So
the Monday
simply
after.
to the Monday after
Wow.
October
Yeah,
10th or something like
yeah,
that,
yeah. Would have been October 9th, I think,
9th or some right, and 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 obviously the flight was canceled.
for
The
sure.
skies were closed.
Yeah,
The world, literally, the world. I obviously now I understand what was happening here. But at the same time, in Little Maryland, in Pikesville, Maryland, where I'm from, we also went into our own caves, into mourning and in total shock,
yeah.
as if it was a strike on our own lives.
So maybe we can spend like 2 minutes just like telling us like
What
how
happened?
did you hear like what was happening?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. Does Maryland, is it like a big Jewish community? Is it?
huge Jewish
Mm-hmm.
community and all levels of religiosity,
Mm-hmm.
and it was Yom Tov,
Yeah.
and everybody was in shul.
So you were just receiving like also people here that
Little
were Jewish. You
bits.
were receiving little like things were dripping in from people that had neighbors or people that themselves weren't fully
The
Shomer
security
Shabbos
guard or
or.
the right,
Mm-hmm.
and we just were in disbelief
Yeah.
until Motzi, Yontav.
Right. So you was also so you also were on Yom Tov on Sunday, right? So you basically had 2 days.
We
Yeah.
celebrate 2 days,
Yeah.
so we didn't know anything. We were really in that little time warp.
Right.
So and of course, she's ready, packed and ready to go on the next
Yeah.
flight out. And then of course Yontif is over and we hear the atrocities and it just fell to our knees. I mean, like it was
Yeah.
just horrible.
In addition to you, does your daughter, who else is like your family is
We have family here, and
in America? Where you're from, though, you're like, how many kids do you have?
oh, okay. So my husband is still in America right now with my youngest daughter.
Yeah.
I have 3 daughters. One that is 21 years old, and she's 20 years old, turning 21. She spent 2 years here and had just come back, like around September, right
Wow.
before Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah.
And she wanted to stay, and she's so funny. She's obviously she's going to be coming back here.
Uh-huh.
My children are just they love
very
Israel.
attached to Israel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then Daya is my middle child. She's 18. She just finished high school, and
Mm-hmm.
she's doing her gap year at Bar Ilan.
Yeah.
And then my youngest is 14-year-old, and she's in 9th grade. And also just, a Zionist at heart, and loves Israel.
Yeah. My parents made Aliyah here, so they made Aliyah a week after they got married. So that was their, like, this was in the 70s, a bit of a different country then, but still, I know what you mean by that, Zionism drive.
They were all in that same generation. I think half of my family came here, and
Mm-hmm.
half of them stayed in America. So we were really just, what do we do?
Right.
And I was like, I'm still going. And I'm like, well, Bar Ilan isn't even open.
Yeah.
They're postponing, and they kept postponing it. And then finally they said that they're opening their doors to the internationals until on November 7th.
Yeah.
And she was still determined. And I said, okay, well then I'm going to go with you.
Yeah.
And I'll see you. At that time, there was not a lot of information on how and where and what volunteers were needed.
Yeah.
Now it's so easy to navigate and find something.
Yeah.
People have really stepped up and organized these groups.
Yeah. I remember actually seeing this form in action, because the first few days there was at the beginning it was a bunch of WhatsApp groups that were running around. People said, you need help here, you need help there. And then it began to be this 1 or 2 WhatsApp groups. There were all these pay boxes, right? Paybox this, paybox that. I'm not sure if you use Paybox abroad, but similar things, right? You these digital wallets that you can contribute to. And then there began to be this website that was consolidating links to all these places, right? And then you could start finding. So much work has gone into trying to link all these civil efforts into a place that you can find your way. So really, by the time you came here in November, it was probably much easier to figure out.
It was, in terms of donations, that was already happening in America.
That was happening already the first week. Yeah.
Right. We were collecting for soldiers, for armory, for hats, for boots, for tefillin, anything and everything. We were already doing all of that.
Right.
And my eyes were glued to social media and to the news.
For sure.
And that was my whole life. And I could not imagine not coming here at that point. I was like, I'm definitely going to go with Dahlia.
Yeah.
It's done. And I booked my flight. And my daughter did not even know at that point that I was going. and then so she thought she was just going, and I was going to say goodbye.
Yeah.
And she's like, wait, you're on my flight? I'm like, yes, Dahlia, I'm on your flight, and I'm going to go for a month, and I'm going to drop you off, set you up at school, and then I'm going to volunteer, and I'll figure it out. She's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'll figure it out. and I did. And it made it a little easier to navigate through once I got here, because Dahlia, her Bar Ilan was scheduling them for volunteer work. And when I I was like, well, wait, how did you get to do farm work?
Yeah.
And I contacted there's this really helpful woman, Orly, at Bar Ilan, and she's like, here's my contact for farms. And that was, one thing led to another person, to another person, to another person. And then before I knew it, I had a million contacts, and every day was filled with something. It was that quick.
So in other words, when you got here, you just knew you would volunteer.
I just knew I was going to volunteer.
You didn't know what you were going to do.
I had no idea what any day was going to be.
You basically let yourself, if people needed help here this day and needed help there that day, you just bounced around.
Showed up.
Just showed up. Right?
I just showed up.
Yeah.
And I was a little nervous because of the sirens. And in the beginning, they were going off all the time.
Right.
And Ramat Gan is where I stayed, because it was the closest to
Bar Ilan.
Bar Ilan.
Yeah.
And it was also, for a month, I just wanted to do something that was, reasonable.
Yeah.
And Bar Ilan was great. They helped me really find something.
Uh-huh.
But it was scary because I didn't grow up in Israel.
Uh-huh.
I was not. I had always heard, and
You were never here for one of
for one of
the.
the sirens,
You were never here
right?
for the operations, for the wars, nothing.
Nothing,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew it. I remember hearing people going, and then they were going to the safe houses, and I remember being so scared for them.
Yeah.
And but to experience it is another thing.
So really, so tell me about the first time that you had
The
the
first
siren.
time I had the siren was the minute I got to Israel. That night, I hadn't even unpacked.
Uh-huh.
I got to my room, and then while I
This
was in
was
the
in a
airport,
hotel?
this was in the hotel.
Uh-huh.
And at the airport, I met someone who said, "You need to make sure you have this when you're
The app.
the app."
Uh-huh.
I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "You're going to need this. It'll tell you when to go into shelter."
Right.
And I had to learn the words also to find what a shelter was.
Mm-hmm.
And I was that really scared me. That really scared me because I wasn't just thinking about me, but I was thinking about what did I just allow for Dahlia.
Yeah.
But she was 18 years old and there was no convincing her. And I, again, did not want to break her spirit. And I didn't want to put fear in her because she doesn't think like that.
Yeah.
So I was careful. And she was already in Bar Ilan. And that night, the bus took her to Bar Ilan and took me to the hotel. And I'm in the shelter. My hotel was all soldiers and Secret Service. And that's how it was actually a good thing, because I would never have known that if that siren didn't happen. And it made my stay in Israel a little bit easier, knowing I was in the safest hotel ever.
Right. Just 1 second. And I just want to make sure don't mix me in case of something. Yeah, go on.
So is that okay? Are you okay?
Yeah. No, I'm all good. I want to make sure. I'll delete this afterwards.
Oh, okay.
This thing has been 100% reliable, but I want to make sure for myself that if something happens to this, I also record. I have a backup recording.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's all.
That's great.
Yeah, it's never failed me before, but just in case.
It's always good to have a backup plan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I was in the shelter with all the soldiers, and that's when I met everybody. And
everybody?
I mean, the soldiers, we were all in the shelter together, and it was the laundry room of all places. It was like this
makeshift shelter. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right in the hotel. And I started exchanging phone numbers and names, because I was like, I want to help these soldiers. They work so hard, and there's a station there for.
What were they doing?
So a lot of the soldiers that are there work in. They don't tell you. They can't tell you.
So they're in intelligence.
They're in intelligence.
Okay.
And they I guess they get time off and they're there sometime, but that's where the Israeli government places them.
Mm-hmm.
But then they go, and then they can go home sometimes on the weekends. Everybody has like a different schedule from what it looked like or sounded like. But I was able to arrange yoga with them on the beach.
So maybe we can talk a little bit about what you do.
Right.
So,
okay.
So what do you do when you're not coming to Israel to volunteer?
When I am not in Israel, I am actually a psychotherapist.
Oh.
And I thought I would be doing more work like that, but my English, I don't speak Hebrew well enough to do the kind of work that I mean,
there's plenty of people let's say like your cousin Daniela, right? Who are like, American and English speakers, and you could work with them in theory.
I could, but they did not pair me with that. And I looked back and I thought, you know what? It's okay, because it may have been maybe a little irresponsible if I would have taken that on, because I don't.
You might leave.
If I leave and they become attached, or I don't really know all the crisis interventions here. What if somebody was suicidal and I wouldn't know how to get them to an emergency room or a psychiatrist? Right. So, I don't have the resources that I would have
for sure
and know of in America.
Yeah. And also the truth is that, now that I think about it, being the first time in Israel during a crisis, right? If they just arrived now, that's one thing. But if they've been here for 2 years or 5 years or whatever, by now they've experienced some of it. And I guess to be an effective therapist, you might need to understand better sort of like what is it like to live here, right? You have like that as a foundation.
Yes. And I had to really learn that. I really learned a lot about the mentality here. You know?
I'm looking forward to hearing about that.
Oh
But
my
yeah.
gosh. I mean, the common, I would say, statement that I heard was, we all know life isn't a picnic here. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard. And I heard that in different ways from so many civilians here, from the soldier. And that was the other thing. We're all soldiers. I heard
Yeah.
that comment so many times
Mm-hmm.
because it wasn't, it's everybody here is a soldier.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a,
There's a bunch of things about that. That first of all is that, yeah, there's all sorts of like social things that happen in the rest of the Western world that they either don't happen here or they take a long time to. And one of the reasons is because, like, and I think I've heard this. I also personally think this way, but I've heard also other people say is that, because Israel is like not a picnic, because we're living always, we're like 5 minutes away from somebody who really wants to kill us.
right,
Um, that that means also that we're dealing with like real problems, so that all sorts of things that are less real problems that arise when you have, in a sense, the luxury to deal with them. They
yeah,
don't they
yeah,
don't come up here as much,
right,
and that's one thing. And the other thing is that, so like that's one of the reasons why, like, when you meet Israelis, like, abroad, they seem much more, let's say, independent and stuff, because they've all been to the army, and they've all, or most of them, been to the army, or they've done shirut or some other thing.
right,
And life here is hard. By the time you're 18, I mean, I think in at least once every decade we have a war on
right.
average. So, like, it just, what does that mean to kids, right? That emerge here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I also think that,
And they are kids.
yeah,
They are kids. I
yeah,
mean, these soldiers are kids.
yeah,
And that was, I think, also just so clear that we send our children to college,
right,
that they've already accepted that, and they're already thinking in a totally different way. Their critical thinking is already intact and ready
yeah,
for war.
yeah,
They're much more, they are much more independent and
yeah,
in survival mode,
yeah,
but it's not a survival mode like curl up in a ball.
right,
It's, we live because this, we're used to living with our enemies pointing guns at us,
yeah,
like at our neighbors.
right. So it's one of those. I mean, there's so much to say about that. The First of all, one of the things that I remember that struck me when I was in America, because I was there for 4 years, I think that one of the things that was the most jarring for me, as I mean, I'm a child of American parents, but we spent 4 years there, and I grew up here. Went to the army, all that stuff, and only got there, much later. And I think one of the things that was the most jarring for me was Memorial Day, because the idea that Memorial Day is a shopping day was something that just could never, and still never really works well for me.
Right,
Okay.
right,
And in Israel, that would never be even possible. And the reason is because, I mean, it took me a bit to figure it out, but I figured it out that, in America, only a scant few go to the army. It's not, it's not like not everybody goes through there. And the things you fight, unless we're in the middle of, let's say, World War II, for the most part, the things you're fighting are things far away, which are part of like a general foreign policy thing, and not so much like, for your personal survival. Let's say, putting aside things, let's say, after 9/11, where there was maybe a different feeling. So Memorial Day is not everybody, not everybody knows somebody who has been in the army or who needs to be, remembered, right?
right,
Here, it's everybody,
right,
right? It's like, and you can't avoid it. There's
right.
everybody has somebody. It may not be like, it's going to be a relative of yours, it can be a friend of yours, it can
Yeah,
be
yeah.
somebody, but there's
Somebody.
nobody that doesn't know. And so there's a very, I mean, like, maybe we'll get to this a little bit later, but there's people think of Israel as like a crazy place because of the conditions that you described, right? We're here, people are pointing guns at us and worse all the time. There's also an element to Israel that is, in some sense, the most sane place, because there's an element to being in Israel that means that reality is always very, very clearly in front of you.
Absolutely.
There's very little room for you to hide or to avoid reality, because if you do, that's sort of what happened to us on October 7th, right? That's sort of
Right,
what happened,
right,
right?
right.
We we don't yet know the full story, but on multiple levels, obviously, somewhere between the army and the government, we were pretending. right?
Right.
And even when we pretend for a short while, that's what happens. So we can't afford to.
Right.
So there's something very raw about but very honest about living here. Whereas, yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is interesting that, the kindness and welcome and um, the friendliness, even post-war,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's still present. And I do think that same kindness is what hurt us, obviously. But I'm so glad that it's still there.
Yeah.
Everybody welcomed me and wanted to make sure I was okay. And I'm like, no, I'm here for you. What can I do? I want to pamper you. I want to
Yeah.
take you. And they're like, no, you're going to come to, when are you coming back? You're going to stay at my house. You're going to stay at my, I mean, I met people from the north, from the south, and
Yeah.
they were just the kindest people. I'm like, so that was still very much
Oh, for sure.
a part of this,
Yeah.
this culture.
Oh, yeah,
It's
yeah.
loving and it's kind and
For
it's,
sure.
it would do anything.
Yeah, and
for
and
me.
you see also, I mean, like this is touching on a different aspect of it, but you know, Israeli Arabs, right? They're like like you go to the shop, they're still working there. It's not that people said, oh,
Right.
we're in a crisis mode. You can't you like we don't want that. Nobody here wants that kind of thing. We want to be able to coexist,
Oh yeah.
and yeah, and then
Everybody told me,
yeah,
you go.
yeah,
Wait, if you don't, then that means they win.
right,
That was like
exactly,
another piece of the mentality that I heard
yeah,
over and over. I would say, is it okay for me to go to the Yerushalayim today? And they're like, why
yeah,
not? Like, I was like, what do you mean, why not?
yeah,
And they're like, it's okay. You
yeah.
go. It's the safest place. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, my son, he's learning now in yeshiva in Gush Etzion, and so it's his first year there, and he was home, of course, for the holidays. So then this thing happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this was the beginning. Everybody was a bit in shock, and then the yeshiva said, "We're going back," and I said, "Okay, go." And a part of you is like, "What?" But it's in the middle of Judea and Samaria. It's dangerous, whatever. But you're like you said, but that's what living is, right? I'm not going
That's
to
what
let them.
living
Yeah,
is.
that's what living is.
What an important message,
Yeah.
to get back out there. And I think that's really different than how trauma is addressed in America.
Hmm.
We spend so much time focusing on the inner dialogue, and we go
Yeah.
do these deep dives into our inner child work. I'm not making fun of it. I
No,
do
no,
a
no.
lot
We
of
also
this
do
work.
it. People also do it here on a
Of
personal
course.
level, but as a
Right.
community, right, and the kind of things that you're pushed to do.
You got to get back out
Yeah.
and live.
Yeah.
And it is I love it. It's a life attitude. It's a living attitude.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw that definitely firsthand.
Yeah.
But here's the one thing that I was kind of confused about. And I said this to my cousin.
Sure.
Obviously I'm okay, but how do they know that I'm not a threat? So I noticed as I stayed every week, the list went from 20 people to then 300 people to 1,000 volunteers on these
Mm-hmm.
WhatsApp groups.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I mean, how are they vetting them? How are they interviewing them? How do they know who's safe? And then before I knew it, there was a statement made, we cannot guarantee the safety of who's posting here. And I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
they're definitely
Oh yeah, for
saying
sure.
that. But I just, wondered,
Yeah.
in America to go in a military, because I do work on the military base in America as well,
Yeah.
which is another piece of some work that I do. It's voluntary. I'll do yoga for the military, for the
Yeah.
the army. But to get onto a base, before you go, they have to do an entire criminal background check on you.
So you've been going into bases? Into a base here also in
yeah.
Israel? Mm-hmm.
I went to bases here and
Yeah.
I did work with
Mm-hmm.
them and boxing and supplies and taping and just
Yeah.
manual labor, warehouse work, and I loved it. And
Yeah.
I have such an appreciation, and and they need it. They
Yeah.
need help because everybody is at war. So
Sure.
they definitely. That's what's so hard for me is knowing that the work is never ending.
Yeah.
It's around the clock. It's never ending, and they need people.
Yeah.
And I mean, my bus came with 30 people. It wasn't enough, and we got through boxes and boxes and boxes.
Right.
But it still wasn't done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, as to the question of the security, I'm guessing that the areas that you were allowed to enter were mainly areas that were less worried about in general. Otherwise, they would have done a deeper security check on you,
I would hope.
probably. Yeah, but also you have to remember that Israel is, because it's such a small country, there is an element in which, things are not as, like, even the army, because everybody goes to the army. So there's also an element there of, like, we're all part of this one big happy family, and we could
Right.
just, walk in and do stuff.
Right.
So yeah, like,
I mean, my husband says, "Don't worry, they know everything you're doing, Dina." I'm like, "Why? Why me?" And they're like,
yeah,
"Cause they have eyes on everything."
yeah, they probably do have eyes on all the areas that are important. Yeah, and
Right.
like a
Right.
lot of things, and when you're trying to create a perimeter, is that you sort of like make sure to check in the important places, and the other places you don't spend too much time. And if
Right.
there's anything
Right.
suspicious, they will start noticing.
Then they
Yeah,
would notice.
but I think that like Israel in general, like the Israeli army, is not a very formal army in its nature because everybody goes.
Everybody goes.
Yeah,
Everyone's a soldier
exactly, and
or
everybody
was a
knows that
soldier.
everybody goes, and everybody knows that you're going to meet your commander next week in a bar somewhere. So
Right.
it's not a career army, right? It's a
It's a way of
half.
life.
Yeah, it's a volunteer career. It's somewhere in the middle between the two, and that makes it also
Right.
less strict. I'm sorry, 1 second.
Sure. Sure.
Ah, spam. Well, we're gonna ignore that.
Oh, you get those too?
Yeah,
Oh, those are very frustrating in America.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so the kinds of things that you did, you're saying you did yoga,
So the soldiers really loved the
you did some
yoga,
packing, like some grunt work.
packing. A lot of most of it was manual labor
Uh huh.
work,
Got it.
and that's fine.
Sure. No, no.
Whatever was
What they needed,
needed,
and
and
it was all in the same area in Ramat Gan, or
I
you went to
I
like some of
went
the
to
fields
Jerusalem. I
and.
went to the fields. I was invited to go further south into Ashkelon, but my cousin, just because I'm traveling alone,
Mm-hmm.
he was like, if your husband was there, then I can see it, but maybe don't go, too
All the way
far.
to the south.
Yeah. So
Uh
I
huh.
didn't do that. And I was able to work with displaced families here in hotels, and that was really
What
nice.
did you do
So
with them?
yoga and shopping sprees.
So what is it? So what is it like? Describe what happens there. So you're in this hotel, and the hotel is filled to the brim just with these people.
Yeah, and
Where were they
no,
from?
everybody. There's everybody.
Okay,
There's
where were they
regular
from?
people, the south or the north, and
Okay.
I would come with just bags of toys for the kids, and it was just amazing. I wish I had even more. Like, but
So you came with toys that you bought here? Like you went to the
yeah,
shop, bought
I
a
went
bunch of
to the shop
toys?
and I would just go and I would
How did you know what
deliver
to
it.
get?
I didn't. I just bought a little bit. I bought for 4-year-olds. I just tried to hit
Yeah,
every age group.
yeah,
And then when I realized how many teens were there, because I
right.
didn't know that, and then me and my daughter took them all out shopping, and because they didn't want to play, like they didn't want the toys.
So how
So
many people are we talking about? You and
there
your
were
daughter
several
were
families. I don't even know how many.
like 10, 15, 20, 30 people.
Yeah,
I mean, how?
yeah.
In one shot, you went like 30 people to do some
No,
shopping?
no. With the family that it was like a group of friends. So it was like, a 14-year-old, maybe her sister and a brother. I couldn't keep track,
Uh
and
huh.
a couple other siblings,
Uh
and
huh.
then some soldiers included in that. And then yeah, we just went shopping and that was fun.
So you just told them,
So
hey guys, you want to go shopping? Is that sort
yeah,
of how it went?
yeah. And it was just neat, and I think that, like, you can't explain what it's like to just do something,
Yeah.
like it's just like, what can I do? Like,
Yeah.
you just want to do,
Right.
and there's not much. There's a language barrier as
For
well.
sure.
Some of them could speak, they spoke better English than I did Hebrew, but
Yeah.
it was still broken, and it was limited, but
Yeah.
it
It's
didn't
harder.
matter. I think
Right.
the love was there, and it was a
Yeah.
lot of I love yous, because that was the easiest phrase.
Right.
So that feels really good. And then I would just do random take a soldier out, just one-on-one. And that was really nice, whether it was for a good hot meal or a
Mm.
shopping spree or a pampering mani
Mm-hmm.
pedi, or one-on-one yoga, and it was just nice to give back.
Yeah.
That it was. I would just find things like that to do, and then of course the farming. You meet everybody. You meet people from all over
So what kind of farming did you?
the world.
Which farms did you go to?
I volunteered with Leket
Okay.
and did the the sweet potato farm, and I learned
Uh-huh.
all about Leket, and I met so many people from all over. Some
Like
of
who?
them would just stay and volunteer for 6 weeks. Like
Yeah.
that is, and they didn't do anything other than farming.
There was these cowboys that came. Did you meet the cowboys?
Yeah, I think the Cowboys. I don't know 100%, but I'm pretty sure the Cowboys and the firemen were on my flight.
Ah.
I think
Wow.
they all came November 7th.
Wow.
You have to look it up because I think
Okay.
I think they traveled from Newark to JFK and were on my flight. But it was a packed flight.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is really nice. So I don't know where they went. They were,
Yeah,
I
I
think,
don't know.
up. I think they were further south.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I heard since then, like reports. We saw the farm. I was like, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have seen them. But I was on the plane with all the Barilan, people.
Yeah.
They kind of put us together.
Yeah. For me, all these people that come, especially people like, not of course, like, anybody that comes, right? I just think that there's like a different meaning to it when Jews come than when non-Jews come. But when the non-Jews come, the thing to me that like I feel like, and I don't mean to like we were talking very much about your personal like things you were doing. What I'm going to say now is going to take us to a much like much more abstract, let's say more like national or international plane.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you see the way in which a lot of parts of the world are more than happy to try and ignore what Hamas did, right?
Yeah, right.
There's a real battle for what the truth is, and through that, through the soul of Western civilization, so to speak, right? There's a deep battle for that, and every time that you see like people that are not Jews like side with Israel, it's one of the things that makes me the most emotional, because it means there are people out there that are looking at this and they understand what is right and what is wrong, and they're willing to say what they think about that and willing to live out those ideals, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, just 1 second.
Very special.
Yeah, just 1 second.
Very special.
1 second, you can add it. It's my daughter. Hi, Kinet. What's up?
I'm sick again.
What happened?
I'm sick again.
You're sick again. What happened?
I don't know. This morning I was fine with a bit of a runny nose, and over the day it just got worse and worse. And now I'm feeling.
You sound terrible. Yeah, you sound terrible.
Anyways, we told me the Eva can only come pick me up around 6:30, and she told me to ask you if you could come pick me up any earlier.
Yeah, I can pick you up earlier. When I'm done here with what I'm doing, I'll be happy to come pick you up.
So let me know what time that'll be, because I need to send them a profound message.
I'll probably be done here around I'll probably come to get your leave here around, let's say, 4 o'clock. Let's say. Sure. Dove, I love you. Bye. It's my daughter. She's in a dorm here, like in the Korsava. But she's not feeling well, so
I'm so sorry.
I'll pick her up like around 4 o'clock.
That's so nice. Yeah. I hope she feels better.
Yeah, me too.
It's so hard when they're not feeling well.
Yeah, that's true. But anyway,
I met some in my building. There were these German Secret Service guys. And
they just say hello. We're German Secret Service guys.
I don't know why I said. Oh, I know. I met them in one of the during the sirens.
How did you know that they're Secret Service people?
I asked them.
What are you doing? We're with the Secret Service.
They looked like
because
curious.
It's not very secret if you're identifying as part of the Secret Service.
So I said, "Are you here because I knew there were German hostages?"
Yes.
But they said, "We're not here for that. We're here because." Apparently there's 30 to 40,000 Germans here. And they said that they were sent to help them come home if they wanted to flee here.
Yeah.
But they told me nobody wanted to leave Israel.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? And then the German government called them back. They they
Yeah, yeah.
left.
The truth is that the story with the Germans is fascinating because Germany has really stood, from the little bit that I've seen,
Yeah,
very, very, very steadfastly sided by Israel.
yeah.
Um, my mother was a teacher for many years. She still works in the American International School here in Israel. There's like a lot of international schools across the world which learn by according to the American curriculum, right? That way, if you,
Mm-hmm.
let's say you're a child of ambassadors, then you can hop around between these institutions and maintain some sort of consistency to what you're studying.
Mm-hmm.
So she was for many years a teacher there, and I remember she had once this student who was, she had this story. I'm probably like, this is like a memory I have from like 20 years ago. So it's probably
It's
not what
okay.
happened, but this is what I remember she telling me was that there was some sort of, she had a student there who was a German student, and he was extremely, like, you could tell that he was very, he felt like, a lot of the guilt surrounding like the Holocaust.
Mm.
Um, and there was this one time there wherein there was some debate in the school about the kinds of books that should be studied or not studied.
Mm.
There were people that were trying to like bring in all sorts of texts that I don't even remember what that text was. But at some point in this conversation, one of the parents who was trying to push for bringing in certain books that were problematic, and again, I don't even know what problematic means because I don't remember the story
Right,
fully.
right, right.
I just remember this part of the story. He turns to this German student and says to him, I mean, wouldn't you like to have the right to, let's say, read Mein Kampf if you wanted to, or something like that?
Mm.
And then the student says, what are you talking about? Like, he was like completely like, hurt by that
Right.
implication. And I just think that it seems that like, at least in large parts of the German society, there's been a real attempt, like real repentance. And this being really like an echo or like a prelude to what could have been a real Holocaust, right?
Right,
There's
right,
a lot,
right.
I think there's really a lot of meaning to that, to the fact
Yeah,
that Germany is standing by Israel so steadfastly
yeah,
in this
yeah.
time.
Listen, we are being given a map. It's just a matter of if we can read it.
Yeah.
And I think that there hopefully are wise people that can look at what is happening and make decisions based on history.
I really hope so.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So
So you've been here all this time. How's your daughter been in this time?
Daya's doing good. She's traveling. She's doing great things. She's volunteering as well. She's enjoying life in Israel, and my guess is that it's not gonna be just a gap year for her. It'll be
Yeah.
much more for her.
Well, things like this also tend to fuse you to the place. When
Oh,
you fight for something, when you're part of,
yeah.
and the thing about being in Israel is that even if you don't do anything, you're just here, right? But it goes back to what we were saying about what life is, right? So when you decide to
Totally.
hold on to a place, even though it's under attack, you're already doing something,
Oh,
like
no doubt.
yeah, and like when this thing first started, so my kids were like, feeling like, especially the older ones, felt like, okay, we're not doing anything. Like, it's everybody else is, so some of them went to volunteer. Let's say they went to volunteer and packing boxes and all this other stuff.
Right.
But they a lot of, like, they on the one hand needed, they were like everybody here, they were dealing emotionally with the shock of it all.
Right.
And at the same time, they wanted to do stuff. And they were feeling like, conflicted about it. So one of the things that I told them, I said to them, you don't understand, even if you guys get through the day and you don't, collapse, from like the pressure, from the tension, from all that stuff, you're part of the war effort. Because if you do that, then that means that me and your mother are not, hampered by, let's say, having to take care of you too much, or
Right.
and then we're free to do, let's say, what we're doing. Let's say, so if I'm doing this war journal, which has its own value,
Absolutely.
or like, or going to volunteer somewhere else, or in other words,
Yes.
everybody is part of it. And once
I
you
believe
start,
that.
is that even in the little, even just getting by for a day is part of
It's
your
huge.
war effort. Exactly.
I love that. And I do feel that way. And I think it's also given me a taste of what it's like to have the strength of an Israeli. And I love that because I want that. I want what you all have. And I'm a little jealous. I wish, and I think it's the greatest thing that you could ever do for your children is raise your children here in Israel
Yeah.
and live here. I think there's a power you get, and it's
Yeah.
something that is in me, but I need
Sure.
to learn it and tap into it
Yeah.
being here. I was going to say something that my daughter and I
Yeah.
did. We did Hafreshet Challah
Oh.
for the soldiers,
Yeah.
and that was really special. And we had met in the hotel a woman who was from Ramat Gan, a religious family, and she took us in and just fed us the most delicious food, and there were so many spiritual, amazing, just experiences with this family
Yeah.
that I'll always remember. And but this one, she invited us. I don't know what day of the week we did it, but whatever, we went there. I couldn't turn down opportunities. I'm like, Daya, we're going. We get an opportunity to, bake challahs for
Yeah.
the soldiers and do a fresh challah. We're doing it in
Yeah.
Israel, and it was just a very special experience, and even the way that everybody here does everything down, just the customs that I don't see in America
Mhm.
are so beautiful and meaningful, from putting 3 drops of water into Kiddush cup, or saying Mizmor David, or spending Shabbat and doing the entire book of Tehillim together. And I mean, things that just made my experience so much more beautiful, because I wasn't just doing the physical
Yeah.
piece, but I was able to take part in some spiritual piece as
Yeah. It was
well.
immersive.
It was immersive, and there was a time where I would have been like, oh, they don't need me, I don't need to go there. And I'm just so glad that I found the co-op, and I was able to say, yes, I'm joining you, and I'll be there. And I actually anytime that they were there or I saw them, I sat with them, and I did Tehillim with them, and it was really very, very meaningful. And this is a magical Israel moment. There's I sit down with this family to do Tehillim, and they're divided into parts so that everybody can read, I guess, a section of Tehillim.
Right.
So she hands me mine, and she gives me mine, and mine was Lamed Gimel. And Lamed Gimel has been a big number in my life, and it was a number that I always associate with my father, because it's a song that we would sing at the Shabbos table. I actually never knew it was Tehillim until another part of my life, when I drew the connection between that song and it being Tehillim.
Wow.
And then of course it shows up, with this beautiful family, and of
I'm gonna
course
check now what Lamed Gimel is. Yeah. Go ahead.
it's Rananit Tzadikim.
Okay.
And it's so beautiful, and it's just, I'm like, of course it's Rananit Tzadikim, and and it just, one more thing. And there were so many little things like that have kept happening here,
Yeah.
which told me that we need to be here. If you're questioning whether or not it's safe or okay to be here, I'm telling you, everything has screamed, come, be here. I mean, I was walking, I wasn't sure if I should go to Yerushalayim, and I really wanted to go to the Kotel, and everyone's like, just go, go.
Yeah.
I go, and I couldn't remember how to walk through the old city, through the Jewish quarters.
Sure.
And I was like, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
And I got to that section where you can go right, left, or straight. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And I look up and I see the street is Or Chaim Street. I was like, it's got to be that. It's got to be Or Chaim. Yeah. And Chaim is actually my dad's name. And I was like, I was sweating. I was actually really nervous, because I was like, one wrong turn. I've heard horrible stories. And sure enough, Or Chaim took me right into the square, and then I was right there.
It just like down the stairs. Yeah.
Just like very just incredible moments that were telling me I was in the right place at exactly the right time, and that we all just need to be here.
Yeah,
we all just need to be here and have strength. And I think that's also a big piece, is that you have to be totally connected and in your strength.
Yeah, there's like, this is actually something that happened to me when I was abroad. But when I was younger, like about 20 years ago, I went with some friends to we went like after the army and after yeshiva, we went to India, like for and Nepal for like a month and a half. And I remember that like so this was like 20 years ago. So it wasn't like people had like cell phones everywhere, etc. But there were internet cafes, and I was able to keep in touch with my family. And then that was fine until a few weeks into that experience when we went off into the Himalayan mountains for like 4 days. We had this jeep and like a guide and a jeep and a driver, and it was just those two guys and me and two friends of mine. That was it. And I remember that was like the first time in my life. I mean, I've been to the army before, but that was the first time in my life that I felt like I was like disconnecting from everything. Like I could disappear, right, and nobody would know where I was. Nobody would be able to find me. There would be nothing. It was very, very scary.
Yeah.
I went off for 4 days, came back, whatever. It was like, did the whole thing together.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember then the way as we were driving back in, I remember suddenly the realization that I went out, I came back. I mean, it was fine. And I realized for the first time that even though I had felt like I was going to be all alone, I always had like myself. Like for first of all, I mean, of course, I had God with me and myself and my friends. There wasn't I wasn't really fully alone. I think there's something about Israel because you're with your back up against the wall and you have to. And it doesn't even I'm not even talking just militarily, just like in general. Like we've been in a sense like it's a startup. You're starting. You're always on the move. You're always dealing with new challenges, and it's always. I mean, I've been quoting this a lot also on this podcast. There's a quote that was from the very beginning of this thing, and looking at some of the international turmoil. There's been a quote by Ronald Reagan that has been going through my mind a lot. He said in I think in '84 in his inaugural address, he was just talking about the general idea of democracy and the peaceful transfer of power. So then he says, we take this thing called freedom for granted, but the truth is that every generation is that freedom is always one generation away from being lost. Like every generation has to, in a sense, reinvigorate that idea.
Yeah.
Israel, you really feel that. Like I'm sure that I think it's true also in America. I think it's true everywhere. I think we're seeing that now.
Yeah.
But I think also the West in general has to fight a certain like kind of like a battle for what for what we stand for, what the West wants to stand for. But in Israel, you really feel that. You always know that you're one generation away from losing everything. So
Absolutely.
and that really shoots a whole bunch of like of life force into you because
Absolutely.
because you know that you're alive.
Yeah. It's become very clear that we hear you've got to pick a side. It's even more than that. You've got to align with God, your creator.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about being jealous of who was chosen and the chosen people. It's that everybody is a child of Hashem.
Yeah.
And we were given this incredible gift we were given the gift of the Torah, but everybody is so special and amazing. You're all a part of life. And I've just become so aware of the value of life, how important life is. That is what sets us apart. This is not about a blame game. This is about you're the people who connect with life force are going to make it. Yeah. It's bottom line. Mm-hmm. And it is that simple. It's that simple. Yeah. You're either going to wake up and realize that you are an amazing, beautiful soul and that you are loved and breathed and supported, and really wake up and be aware of that and what that entails, or you're not. And if you're not, you're probably not going to make it. I don't know how you're not going to make it, but you're probably not. Right. And it's scary and it's sad, and that there will be people who don't make it through this. But I know I'm not going to. I know that I'm going to be the one who is going to pray every day. Mm-hmm. And I think that ever since this war, it's just strengthened my emunah, taking on just a little more, making sure I say a bracha, making sure that I daven every single morning, shacharit. Yeah. Little things. Sure. And also I really like the idea of there's um, a lot of hate,
Hmm.
and I haven't figured out how I'm going to do this when I get back, but I want to share how beautiful the Jewish people are, and use my voice on that, on that platform,
Yeah,
and see where that's going to go, because I think that that's going to be, something I have to navigate through.
sure.
Um, but I definitely am struggling with going back to America.
Right. You're doing that like this week?
Yeah, leave
Wow.
on Wednesday.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a challenge, and there's so much hate and there's so much misinformation
Hmm.
back at home, and I'm trying to organize a similar yoga event that they did here in Tel Aviv, and they in 2 seconds they were able to gather hundreds of people to do yoga, and in America I can't even get 10.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is that I've even been told you would probably get a lot more if you didn't say you were in support of Israel. And I'm like, well, the whole purpose is to be in support of
Yeah.
Israel. And um, it's just so sad that
Yeah.
this is what I'm going to have to come home to.
Yeah. I think one of the things that is sort of like, I mean, I there's things that I hope are true and I believe are true, but that it's sort of like it needs to be figured out is, when you look at the people that are um, willing to, let's say, turn a blind eye to what Hamas did or tear down the posters or whatever, there's a really good question: how many of them are mainly misinformed, and that if you just talk to them like a normal human being, then that can all dissipate, right? And you can
Right.
find a way. And then it may be a lot of work. You have to meet. You have to do one-on-one work. It's not, I'm going to put a poster somewhere and then people will come to my
Right.
yoga thing. I don't know what the answer is. Yeah, I mean, like if, but there's a lot of that, like people
Mm-hmm.
just not knowing.
Education,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
and then those people that something has unfortunately twisted within them in terms of their value system of what they
Yeah.
consider to be right and wrong, and then it's
Right.
much harder to penetrate that.
And I don't know if that can, because I think that is something that is a spiritual issue.
Yeah,
I mean, to me,
I know.
it's when somebody can't see the problem with murder and rape,
Yeah,
then that is not something that is beyond the five senses.
yeah. I think also it goes a bit deeper because part of the I think that we have, and this is also like a topic for a different different time, but
Right.
part of the problem that I think we have is that, especially because we haven't had a real war like in our face for a lot of people. I mean, Ukraine has happened, but a lot of things that happen, let's say with Ukraine and Russia, feel like distance. Doesn't feel like
Right.
it's you, right?
Right.
One of the things people don't understand is that war. When you look at questions of morality, Israel's also killing people, right? It's part of the cost of war, right?
Right. Right.
The statement is not just about it's I'll put it spiritually. There's this one. Um, it's a very interesting thing, like in the Bible that Yaakov, the third, like the third patriarch. So every one of the patriarchs has like a certain trait, a character
Right.
trait that's associated with him.
Yeah.
And
From
Yaakov's
the
one is emet, is truth, and his counterpart is like alter ego is Esav, and his theme is lying.
right.
But it's always been very, very interesting and people have commented about this because Yaakov's main behavioral trait is lying. I mean, he pretends to be a Esav when he takes the blessings, and
Right.
he avoids confronting Lavan, and he runs away from Lavan, etc. And I've given classes about this, but the deeper meaning of that is that when you're talking about what is truth and what is lying, there's layers of what is true and what is lying,
Right. Right.
and being able to really understand what is really true is not always so simple, and from
Absolutely.
from afar you can say, well, Israel is killing more people than the Palestinians, that means that Israel is wrong. Yeah, but that's a very, very shallow way of looking
That's right.
at morality. And I think that because, let's say, America that fought the Second World War, people would have understood. People that haven't done that yet, people that
That's right.
they don't live with that kind of awareness of
Well,
how to judge right and wrong in those situations.
exactly. And I think that if you forget that you're dealing with psychopathic behavior,
Exactly.
it's not that difficult to
Right.
understand. And you don't need a PhD to know that
Right.
you're dealing with psychopathic behavior. If you
Exactly.
forget that, then you will find yourself saying, oh, but you shouldn't do that.
Right.
But if you remind yourself that you're dealing with a psychopath, then you have to deal with the psychopath in a
Right.
different way.
Right.
And I my interpretation of how Yaakov dealt with Esav was more about the message that you cannot deal with people like that in the same way you would a friendly neighbor.
Right.
With a friendly neighbor, you can have a normal conversation because they're normal,
Right. Yeah.
But with a psychopath, you can't.
Right.
They're not normal.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they're not normal.
Right.
I didn't make them. I
Yeah.
don't know why. Could you argue that some of them were environmentally that way and nature nurtures the? I'm sure
Right.
you could
But that's
prove
the bottom
either.
line.
But either way,
Yeah.
you have to address them not as your friendly neighbor.
Right.
You have to use tactics that are for a psychopath.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting how you're like we're gonna wrap up in a second, but it's interesting how what you're doing there in that last bit is showing how part of your, let's say, training as a therapist, like also translates it to how you see, and it's very interesting because therapists, on the one hand, probably are trained to like be able to see everybody, like from when they're in their own world, but then to be able to say, we also know that there are people like psychopaths who, even if they have their own internal world, you don't want to see things. You can't build a policy around accommodating that internal world.
And a good therapist knows
Yeah.
and will keep that boundary.
Yeah.
It is a scary therapist that doesn't.
Yeah.
If you're a therapist that is too nice and too understanding and accommodating, then you have poor boundaries and you're the one that's going to get shot by the next patient because you let your guards down and you stop being a therapist.
Right.
So
there's always you have to keep some sort of a distance.
Have to keep your therapist cap on.
Right, for sure.
And the same thing in this situation, and the same thing in in America, it's the same thing. You have people who, they call them narcissism, or they'll call them psychopaths, or it's the same type of thing. You have to be smart, and you can't. These are very manipulative people.
Yeah.
And they can gather a whole army, as you can see.
Yeah.
And they're mischievous, and they can put together organized crime better than a lot of people. And look at how quickly they did in America and in all the countries around us. That is something that it's criminal. It's organized crime.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, to me, it's pretty obvious that people they let their guards down. That doesn't mean that you're a fool.
No, I get
it means that they are criminals that took advantage of kind people.
And fool me once, but fool me twice is already a separate story.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. And that's okay. It's to defend yourself, and then you have to put up. That's why we have jails.
Right.
That's why we have prisons. That's why we have death penalty. That's why. And it's not fun, but we have to protect the moral fibers of our people. Not just here, not just in Israel, but everywhere.
Right.
Everywhere. Yeah. So.
Anyway, thank you so much.
Oh,
we're going to stop over here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And good luck on your going back to America.
Thank you. I don't want to. I want to stay here. Sure. There's still so much.
Once you get back, I'm sure you'll find ways to do things there. And if you want, in a few weeks, we can try to set up another follow-up and see how things look once you get back there and you reunite with your husband and your daughter there, and how things, etc. I'd be very happy to hear, because I really think the story is international. It's not. It's not just what's happening here. It's happening to Jews everywhere.
Absolutely.
So I'd be very happy to hear also what's going on.
I will let you know.
Okay.
I will let you know.
Thank you again, Dena.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
It's nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Bye.